I'm Tan Mopin. I'm organizing co-chair of this meeting. Right. I know you guys must be all brained out by now after a morning of very interesting talks, but we have got another interesting talk by none other than Dr. Lim Po Hin. He's been around with the Malaysian Healthy Aging Society before I ever came back to before I ever knew him or came back to Malaysia, and I can't believe on reflection that we actually now know each other for 10 years. So this year is the 10th anniversary of us having met each other through the Malaysian Healthy Aging Society. And I have to say, he has always been a stalwart supporter, and he served a stint as the president of the Malaysian Healthy Aging Society, as well as, and he continues to be a very active member of the committee, as well as always participating in every single Malaysian conference on healthy aging. He's a consultant neurologist, currently working at KPJ Ampang Puteri, and he has actually received training in the United States of America. He was trained in none other than MIT, the top university in the world in biological sciences, before undergoing his medical training. So it's a postgraduate medical program in the United States of America, in Columbia University. And after he graduated, he then undertook a fellowship training in neurology, and then came back and served the Malaysian people as a neurologist in UPM for some time, but he's now working in the private practice, but continues to actually be of service to us all through the Malaysian Conference of Healthy Aging. So, over to you, Dr. Lim. We look forward to a very stimulating talk.
Thank you, Prof. Tan. I hope and trust that you can hear me. Right now, I am actually back in KPJ Ampang Puteri, back in Kuala Lumpur. I would have liked to be in Penang, but unfortunately, I caught COVID the week before and had been quarantined, and I'm a little bit not quite healthy enough to travel, and so I'm here in KL, actually babysitting, and if my son's face pops up and down, don't get a surprise. It's not a hallucination. It's memory exercise. When you talk about memory, the most important thing people think about is basically things like Alzheimer's disease, people who have forgotten things and all that. But it's good to remember, good to think about what is memory. Okay, what is memory? Memory is a cognitive function that helps us humans, which allow us from our sensory perception to actually learn new information, to store information for later use, and to retrieve those stored information where it is needed, okay? And there's a reason why we have memory. Why do we actually have to remember things? It's in order to better interact with our environment and with others. Okay, so if you look at it from the theological, or the reason for having it. Okay, when you talk about memories, we usually basically group it into long-term memory, short-term memory, and immediate or working memory. Long-term memory is the vast store of knowledge and record of prior events in a person's life. So when you were born, if you were married, got married. So those things are episodes within your life. So that's a store of that episodes or events. But you also have long-term memory, which is declarative, semantic, which is just a general knowledge of how the world works, how you actually can get by in the modern world, using ATMs and things like that. You remember general information like when Malaysia was independent back in 1957. That's basically declarative memory, but it's what we call a semantic memory rather than and episodic memory, which is linked to your personal experience of life, okay? So that vast knowledge is actually stored in your brain. It's distributed to different parts of your brain, and it's usually located near to the kind of sensory modality which is storing the memory. So for example, the memory of what your first girlfriend looked like, it would be in the back of the brain near the occipital lobe. How she sounded, as how she felt. Okay, I won't say too much there. Okay, but short-term memory, basically that limited amount of memory that's readily accessible when you are using it. Okay, and it's going to go into long-term memory. But another kind of short-term memory, so you would give a person 5 ringgit, and then it's about 1 ringgit. So you should be keeping the 1 ringgit in your mind and the 5 ringgit, and then you subtract that, so you're expecting 4 ringgit. Okay, of course now it would be wrong nowadays, because of course nasi lemak is not 1 ringgit anymore. It's probably closer to 3 ringgit. But basically that's the general idea. You have something that is kind of like in your computer RAM. It's just floating there. You switch off the memory, the computer, the memory's gone. Okay, so this kind of thing is very ethereal. It's not really very concrete. Okay, so like for example, if you're baking something, you'll be trying to remember what you just put in and what you're about to put in. So that's basically working memory. Okay. So as we grow older and older, this condition called dementia will become more and more common among us. Okay, so it's a disease of forgetfulness, but in addition to that, of course, there's also impairment of other function, such as problem solving, social skills, perception or motor skills, and language. Okay, so dementia is basically this catch-all phrase of a condition in which you have global impairment of your higher cognitive function. And basically causes are very varied. You can have things like Alzheimer's disease, which is the main or the most majority cases of dementias, but other things like strokes can cause dementia, Lewy body disease, frontal temporal dementia, and of course traumatic brain injury. You can see cases where people have had a lot of trauma in their lives. A good example would be rugby players or American football players, where they hit in the head a lot. In later life, they tend to have dementia. There's a condition called Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, which is kind of like an infectious disease, although the infectious particle is actually a protein. So, it can be transmitted via things like saliva, and you can actually end up with it. HIV and alcohol-related dementias, all right? And lately, of course, that we have had a couple of years of coronavirus or SARS-CoV-2, right? There's a lot of people who have had memory problems associated with coronavirus 19, COVID-19. Which is, at this point, is a little bit early to actually tell what the long-term effects are, but it's coming there, I think. Okay, all right. So dementias basically increases with age. It affects about 50 million worldwide, projected to double by 2050. Actually, more than double, maybe close to triple. Locally, about 123,000 in Malaysia are down with dementias. Okay, which is expected to double by, I suppose, around 8 years from now. The prevalence is usually higher in the 60 and above age group, another 5 years for me, I guess, in which about up to 1 in 5 may actually have some cognitive impairment, according to one of the studies that was done in Selangor. Okay, so you'll see that the prevalence increases with age, and if you are below the age of 65, there's less than 5% of dementia patients who are in that age range. Dementia subtypes, majority of it are Alzheimer's type, which is more than 60%, but strokes can cause dementia, multiple strokes. mixed Alzheimer's and vascular, is basically within the subset, the intersection between the big groups. Lewy body disease, frontotemporal dementias, these are a lot less common, right? And just going through the risk factors for dementias, basically you have got the non-modifiable risk factors, things like advanced age, gender, more females, possibly because a lot of men are already dead, so there's a higher number of females who are still alive. There are genetic factors. We know that certain mutations in the amyloid precursor protein, presenilin. There's also allele called the ApoE4, epsilon 4, which is within the metabolism of two alleles from the mother and father, your risk of developing dementia is 20-fold. If you have an ApoE2, your risk is actually reduced, okay? So we know that these things are possibly genetic. We know that people with learning disabilities are 2 to 3-fold more likely to have dementias. And of course, patients with Down syndromes, the dementia is very, very high, 50% at the age of 60, right? So there are non-modifiable risk factors which you cannot do very much about. It's basically fated, it's something that's handed to you, you can't do very much about. But there's also modifiable risk factors. And in this healthy aging conference, we talk a lot about disease modification, basically taking care of your illnesses, lifestyle factors. So what we do know, which is very common for both Alzheimer's as well as multi-infarct dementia or vascular dementia, things like high blood pressure, diabetes, abnormal cholesterol, smoking, excessive alcohol use, obesity, sedentary lifestyle, reduced mental activity. You see like when people are stressed out at work and they go retire at 60, and they have basically no more goals in life, kind of say, So, and then, within a few years, you'll see that they are basically reduced in terms of their cognitive ability. Because human beings have to be challenged, constantly challenged, okay? And we mentioned earlier about head injury, especially those who are involved with sports which have a high risk of injury to the head, like things like rugby or American football, boxing, I suppose you put in Canadian hockey, ice hockey as well. So certain sexual activities like syphilis, HIV. I had a patient who was actually an older adult who had developed dementia the past 5 years, and he actually had HIV. He had syphilis in his bloodstream, blood tests. Okay, so respiratory infections now, we know that COVID-19, especially in older adults, seem to lead to higher risk for dementia. We don't really know very much at this point because we are just into 2 years of this illness. But I think that there's a very, very high risk that you'll find a lot more dementias that arise from people previously exposed to COVID. Earlier, we talked about these leisure activities. You heard about the activities that seem to help to reduce dementia, and this came from an article by Joe Verghese in, I think he was working in Albert Einstein Medical School in the Bronx, New York. And what he did in 2003 was he enrolled community dwellers, people living in the community between the age of 75 and 85. And he followed them over a period of 21 years, either every 12 to 18 monthly, looking at the medical condition and doing neuropsychological testing, right? And he had them also record their mental and physical activity, right? So basically he looked at how often they were doing the physical exercises and then what type of mental exercises they were doing. In the next page, we'll say actually what these things showed. Okay, but what he found was that those developing dementia were not really medically or physically different from those who did not develop dementia. Okay, but what he found was, okay, had a hazard ratio of 0.26, musical instrument, okay, crossword puzzles, reading, dancing. I'm not sure why dancing, but you know, it seems like dancing seems to be a little bit more protective than all of that. Okay, so, but I think that if you look at these leisure activities, things like reading, board games, musical instruments, dancing, you know, all of these things have something in common, which is basically they use your ability to process information. You need to actually be thinking through what you're doing when you're dancing or reading. Interestingly, when he looked at writing, they didn't seem to make any much difference. I know, I'm not sure why. So, you know, you don't seem to be doing a lot of, I guess, mental work when you're writing, probably writing rubbish and all that. But basically, when you're reading and you're reading up on things, you know, it seems to engage your mind in thinking. All right. So basically, what we have found is that when you actually do exercise, you engage your mind to improve your memory. It does seem to help, especially in people who are starting to have mild to moderate memory impairment. Okay. Training use of compensatory memory strategies to improve your memory is effective for people with mild to moderate memory impairment, okay? And those who have insight in their memory impairment. So those who are aware they're starting to lose memory. And so, you know, they're also motivated to use strategies to overcome this problem with their memory. Of course, if you are not aware you've got a problem, then you would not be motivated to do anything about it, okay? So those strategies do not work well in patients with severe memory impairment, possibly because, you know, maybe they're not aware, or maybe because they are not able to learn these new strategies and they're not able to remember to use them when they need to, okay? So what we do find is that memory training helps to maintain and improve cognitive and functional ability in daily lives, but they seem to be helpful, especially with patients with mild and moderate memory impairment. But those who are in severe, they really, really need you know, a little bit more constant supervision and help. All right, so when we talk about memory training strategies, there are a few strategies that we employ, and I basically took this from some websites by speech therapists and occupational therapists, okay? So you think through about your own ability to remember things, okay? So what do you actually have to do to remember, retrieve information back, right? And then you think about the times when you were actually younger and you're trying to learn things in school and all that. What actually seemed to help you to retain memory after you have listened to your, your teacher droning on and on? Unfortunately, in our Asian setting, we tend to have this idea that you have to remember things and just repeat them. But I think that in order for us to actually remember well, we have to actually be involved. We have to actually have some personal connection with the things that we are trying to remember. Because otherwise, basically facts will float around like rojak, floating around, and it doesn't really come out when you need it. Okay. So we're going to talk about internal memory strategies. So mental techniques that help you to train to store and retrieve information better. And also we'll talk a little bit, much less, about external memory strategies, everyday objects that help us to remind us to do things, or habits that help us to reduce the need to remember specific things. Sorry, I'm still recovering from my COVID. Okay, so some of the internal memory strategies are basically rehearsing. I find sometimes quite funny, when I'm actually trying to tell my patients what to do, how to take the medicine, all that, and basically you get a little irritated because then they say, okay, doctor, is that what you're saying? I have to take this like 3 times a day. Yes, that's what I just said, So, no, but it's actually a memory strategy. That patient is actually trying to remember better, because the doctor now say something, goes in one ear, goes out the other. No? So, but when you start to use this and you basically try to say it back, and if you try to rephrase it aloud in your own words, it sticks a little bit better, right? And if you old long time ago, what you'll find is that when you read something silently and when you read something aloud, there's actually a bit of difference. You can actually remember better if you read things aloud. Okay, so because the thing is actually going through a verbal, an auditory kind of a pathway as well, not just through your eyes and then into your brain, but also through your hearing as well. Okay. So the other thing is, of course, repeating over and over again, either silently or loud, something that you have to remember, okay? So sometimes when you're young, you remember that you were trying to learn a new word, okay? So the thing that you were told now is that, okay, say the word 5 times, okay? Strategy, 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 strategy. So you kind of start to have a little bit more ability to remember certain words if you repeat them. This is something that we also see as we grow older as well. If you are asked to remember certain numbers, you try to remember them. One time it won't be so effective. You repeat the numbers several times, there's likelihood that you might actually remember. Okay. Clarification, asking others to repeat or rephrase the information similar to what you are talking about in terms of rehearsing. So it basically strengthens or solidifies the information. Rhyming is something that helps you to remember certain things. I'm not sure if you're good at rhyming, but a lot of times, a lot of things that we used to learn, will actually be nursery rhymes, things that are useful. So a thing that we don't have here, which is probably poison ivy, basically leaves of tree, let it be. So if you see something that's 3 leaflets, it's probably poison ivy, don't touch it. So it's something that helps you remember. You can have acronyms or alphabet cueing. So any music lovers basically remember this phrase, every good boy does find or deserves something or other. So basically the idea is that you are talking about musical notes on the treble clef. So there's an E note, then a G, B, D, and an F. Okay. Then the one that I'm not really good at music, so forgive me. But the one that I do remember is the VI boys get your own. Violet, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange, and red. So colors in the rainbow. Basically, because I used to be a VI boy, so that's something that helps. Chunking means organizing, dividing to more manageable bits. Okay, so a lot of it is things like basically numbers. When you see a new person and you get a phone number, you probably will forget it within like 4 or 5 minutes. When I actually I have to deal with a lot of numbers because I see a lot of private patients, and so in the middle of the night, like 2 o'clock in the morning, this morning I had a call. So half awake, I had to actually remember. So what was the number again? Let's see, it was 683-324. So you chunk it 683 and then 324. If you try to remember 683, 324, basically you won't remember the whole thing, all right? But if you do 683 and 324, you break it into chunks that are more manageable to remember, right? Then it will stick better, right? So I mean, you can also keep your shopping list kind of like grouped together, like, okay, veggies, I need broccoli, I need tauge, I've got meat. Okay, so I'm going to have like 3 there. Okay, I'm going to have lamb, pork, beef, etc. Dairy, I need some milk. So if you chunk it, instead of remembering all the 9 things, you break it up into different groups, it'll be a lot easier to remember, okay? So then the other thing, of course, is actually creating visual imagery of the information in your memory palace, okay? So if you have like a house, okay? And then you imagine that you're going down the steps to go into a room, right? So, you can basically look at number one, the door, okay? So, you make a very, very funny image, okay? So, I got 9, 10 grocery items, okay? So I look at the door and I picture a slab of steak there with some bacon, okay, right? So I'm walking there and I can see a piece of bacon and steak on the floor, okay? Then I keep walking down, okay, what do I see, okay? When I get to the bottom of stairs, number 5, let's say, then basically I'm seeing my broccoli and my bananas, So I picture that there, okay? So then I'm going to the door and basically I see my butter. So you try to picture in your mind, because some people are more visually trained than others. Then basically what happens is that you go to the shop, then you start to think, okay, when I went to my memory palace, my house, when I went through the front door, what did I see? I see a piece of steak. I see basically bacon. Then I walk down the stairs. What did I see? I saw some broccoli and all that. Then I went to the door and I saw some milk and butter. So that's basically what that thing will do. Okay. So the other thing, of course, is that basically you can make associations. So if you are trying to link new information, like you need to remember to eat your medicines. You usually link it to something that you have to do. Okay, so every day, of course, most of us at least, brush our teeth and eat our breakfast and lunch and dinner. So one of the habits that you can do is actually make these new things, new information, or like tasks like taking medicines, associate with what you already do on a regular basis. Okay, so when you associate that, then it actually helps for you to remember. All right. Okay, so basically, just going through now, external memory strategies are very, very commonplace because we live in a very, very modern age. So in the old days, you used to have basically paper organizers. Now we have got Google Calendar, right? If you see down there, there's basically 11:15 my event, okay? So I prospectively remember to do it, okay? You can also have your handphone remind you to do certain things, right? So like for me, I've got my handphone basically having bugle calls for waking up and sleeping. Not really for, I usually forget about it now, myself. But it's more for me to remind my son to fall asleep. Yeah. All right. Okay, so basically you can have electronic voice recorders, because it takes time for you to write new information. But if you can, you have notebooks for new information. Like I keep my information in my, so I've got like something like this where I actually put down some things I have to remember. Okay, so it's very useful. Pill organizers, you've got these pill organizers that you can actually keep so that you don't have to remember whether you took the medicine or not. Okay. Now, of course, the other thing is actually to create specific places for specific things. Okay. So I used to be, very, very bad at remembering where my keys are, my wallet are. So now it's very, very cheap. You go to Mr. DIY, get a little buckle there. So you always keep your keys and your wallets there, and it will never go wrong. Okay. So the only thing, of course, is that you have to be very disciplined about it, and I'm not so well. But now it's much better now because I keep it in one place. All right, so those are some strategies. Okay, so last few minutes, we're going to talk through quickly for maybe younger people, learners. Okay, so some memory strategies for learners. Number one, focus. You must pay attention when you're trying to learn. If you're studying, you need to make sure that you have less So if you learn new information, you cram it down, it becomes rojak. What you need to do is learn a little bit, and then you do it yourself. You go maybe a week later or a month later, get back to the thing, okay? And that way, that information will become more and more solidified in your mind. Organize and structure the ideas or the concepts together, use mnemonic devices, which are memorable verbal phrases. Like for example, naming the planets in the solar system. Okay, my very educated mother just showed us 9 planets. Okay, so Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and unfortunately Pluto lost its status as a planet. The other thing I had was basically I teach my students about basically the Argyll-Robertson pupil. Okay, Argyll-Robertson pupil is one of the things that you see in syphilis, right? So syphilis you associate with prostitutes, and then of course prostitutes, I'll get in trouble with this. They react, okay, not at all emotionally, so they don't react to light, but they accommodate physically. Okay, so whatever. All right. Then, of course, you also want to go through, if you want to remember and learn things at a deeper level, more than just very superficial ideas, you basically want to be going through, reading, and then study more deeply, and then just go repeating several times. I think we covered that earlier. Visualize concepts. So draw out relationships. You can put it on 3x5 cards. Mind maps help, basically to make graphical illustrations, because sometimes pictures are worth 1,000 words. All right. Then you try to relate new information to what you already know, and basically every time you learn something, right, you try to remember what you learned before, and basically try to get to know what principles they actually underlie. Verbalize, read aloud. If you read aloud, I mentioned earlier, it will be more solidified in you, going through another pathway, the hearing. Teach others. When you teach others, what you're forced to do is you are forced to learn how to articulate, how to actually be able to organize in verbal form the concepts, and they seem to help you to remember. Okay. Now, of course, if you have more difficult to understand ideas, you should spend more time trying to concentrate, because sometimes if you do not understand, it will actually cascade down to later things. Okay, so it's very important to really make sure that you try to understand difficult ideas. Now, of course, last thing, of course, is something that we all never do enough, which is sleep. Now, we need to sleep sufficiently, because when you do not sleep enough, your brain is not functioning optimally. So the thing about sleep is that other than physically relaxing us, okay, mentally, subconsciously, our brain is exposed to a lot of information during the day, and it does help for you to sleep and dream through. And there are cases where people came up with solutions. Okay, so the famous example would be Singer, the Singer sewing machine. So Singer was the inventor who actually dreamt, and he basically dreamt that someone got stabbed, and then kept being pulled out. So he came up with this idea that through the cloth. Very important for us to actually a good lifestyle, so they actually be working on memory training. Okay, so we need to try to prevent delayed cognitive decline. Memory training provides a means to deal with these challenges by improving daily function through our memory improvement, allows for longer independent functioning in older adults, and reduce future care needs. And we use internal as well as external memory aids. And so, thank you. And I'm open to questions.
Hi, everyone. Slight technical hitch, but I think much better than yesterday, right? Yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. Yep. Okay. Anyway, thank you very much for that lovely talk. Are you ready for questions now? We're about to bombard you, Dr. Lim. Yeah. Thank you so much, by the way. You must be feeling, you look like you need a few nights, good night's sleep. Have you been coughing yourself awake all night for the last few nights? Can you hear me, Dr. Lim? Have you been having trouble sleeping the last few nights with all the coughing? Cannot hear. Okay, can you hear me, Dr. Lim?
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. Have you been staying up all night coughing for the last few nights?
A little bit.
Not too bad. Yeah, can't hear him. How are we doing? Okay. Maybe I can start off with the first question while the audience warms up. Oh, okay. You've already got a first question? Okay, yeah. Have you got a mic with you? Yeah? Okay, can someone run to her with a mic? Great. Okay, fire away.
Hello, Doctor, thank you for the great lecture. Actually, I'm Hazana, family physician from Klang. Actually, I would like to know how you gain interest for those dementia patients. I mean, for the first start, because I think some of them have their own interests, and I think to start and then to link with what they have, their interests, maybe have some challenge. So maybe you can share. Thank you.
Could you hear the question?
I'm not quite sure
so
of the question.
Yeah,
How do we put in our insurance form, is it? Dementia?
How do we find out what kind of things interest them so that we can engage them in activities? Does that make sense? How do we stimulate their interest? Because a lot of times I think she's addressing the apathy as a symptom, as a dementia symptom, because a lot of times you say, let's go out, I don't want, can't be bothered, those sort of things. So how do you engage them in activities by stimulating their interest?
Well, I don't really know the answer to that. Basically, when you grow older, a lot of people, they tend to be more set in their ways. And I think that most
sorry,
them in things that they already enjoy. At home. Online. Last couple of years. So I've had a lot of patients complaining of very, very much difficulty in family members actually in getting them to do things. So the COVID has actually been a very negative factor for them. But I think that I think the family members have to decide what is the most effective way to engage them. So for some of my patients, actually, they enjoy going shopping. So they go out, they will be more stimulated than if you're still stuck in the room, and watching TV. We call that the idiot box because it doesn't really stimulate the minds.
So by the sounds of it, the answer is throw away the television and keep them and keep them as part of your regular family kind of keep them in your regular family activities. I think that's what you're trying to say, right? Because I think it's there's a very bad lag in the system. Yep. One more question, one last question. Yeah, Dr. Lim, I take exception for you saying older people are stuck in their ways. Then maybe it's actually a protective mechanism by which they actually want to stay in routines because that makes them feel secure, because otherwise they forget to do how to do things. It's actually a dementia symptom. Being stuck in your ways is a dementia symptom. What do you think?
Hello?
Tak boleh.
Hello? Hello?
Ooh. Okay, being stuck in your ways perhaps is not a characteristic of an older person, but a dementia syndrome.
Work with what their previous and basically interests are. Obviously, if they are depressed in addition to demented, it doesn't help for them to just basically be left alone. But I think that family members would know what they used to be very, very much involved with, and getting them involved with something that they are used to when they were not demented, rather than starting anything new that may actually make them more frustrated trying to learn something new. But anyway, yeah, no, I do agree with you. We can't let them be, but I think basically it's good for them to be involved with things that make them happy. So I think that like the Albert Einstein's study was actually a good study that showed that basically engaging our minds even later on is very, very beneficial in terms of trying to keep people cognitively functioning well.
Thanks so much. Okay, in the interest of times, there will be no more questions. If you have any questions, I just had a couple of questions coming through WhatsApp, but I'll answer them personally, if that's okay. So it remains for us to thank Dr. Lim in the usual way. Thank you very much, Dr. Lim, and we hope that you will be fighting fit the next time we see you, which will be soon. Bye.